Welcome to Alberta Live, brought to you by Fuse Logic TV. I am Sunita Kolzuchi, and with me here in the studio is Tim Uppal. Thanks for being here. He's Member of Parliament from Edmonton, Sherwood Park. He's the incumbent Conservative Party candidate in the upcoming federal elections and seems to be a bit of a favorite with the party high command. But more of that personal stuff later on. We will begin on a more impersonal level. First question, Mr. Uppal. I believe you are on the acting chair. You are the acting chair of the Health Committee of the House of Commons.
Well, I was, yes.
Till Parliament,
yes.
Yeah. So you've been a member also of the Capital Health Community Health Council.
That's correct.
So what's your first-hand experience? There's so much debate in the country about health.
Yes, absolutely. It's such an important issue. It's a major issue in this election and even any previous elections. Anytime you speak to Canadians, Canadian healthcare and the Canadian healthcare system is so important to them. We as Canadians, we cherish our healthcare system. We pride ourselves on the fact that no Canadian should be denied any medically necessary treatment or healthcare. And that's the Harper government stands by that. And we stand by the pillars of the Canada Health Act and stand by the fact that we should have a publicly funded healthcare system.
Yes, we heard the Prime Minister saying that there would be the normal 6%, I presume it's 6% hike in increase to the provinces. Mm-hmm. The issue here is the Conservative philosophy, Mr. Uppal, and you would understand that better than anyone else. The deep, hardcore Conservative, fiscal Conservatives, they're upset. They're saying that you're not addressing the basic issues, and the basic issues are the wastage and, you need to beef up that entire healthcare system. What do you say?
Frankly, as a federal government, we have to respect the provinces and their jurisdiction. So on healthcare, the federal government is responsible for health transfers, for funding that healthcare, and we're also responsible for making sure that the provinces abide by the Canada Health Act. So we're doing that. So no Canadian should be denied medically necessary treatment. But also, on our part, we have increased funding to the provinces by 6% per year. So even at a time through recession, when we are now focused on paying down our deficit, we are not going to cut the transfers to healthcare.
So what do you say about solutions to the healthcare system? I mean, you've had first-hand experience with all these committees. Has there been any input in terms of how you can better the system itself and cut off inefficiencies and so decrease the amount of money that's going into this, into the system? It's being stuffed with money.
I think what's important is when we come up to the 2014 Health Accord and we start to discuss this and negotiate it, I think accountability is going to be an important part of it. So as a federal government, we need to put in measures that we make sure that when we give this money over to the provinces, that it goes where it should be going. Not that we're accusing provinces of not doing that, but there has to be some checks and balances and accountability. The other thing is the general health and well-being of Canadians. We need to promote general good, a good, healthy way of life, and we've done that with children's fitness tax credits to encourage young people to get involved in physical activity. We actually, in this election, have introduced an adult fitness tax credit, so that would encourage adults to go get out and be more active. It's something that would not only save a lot of healthcare dollars and take pressure off the healthcare system, but also something that's just good for Canadians to be more active. We've worked on reducing smoking, something that we worked with the different organizations and Cancer Institute of Canada and them, and worked with them to reduce the level of smoking. So we've invested in brain research. We've invested in cancer research. So there's a number of particular things that we can do that are where we can get results, where we see that we can get results that we will invest into, and we've done that.
Are we heading the way that the United States has already headed? They're in a real crisis as far as deficits are concerned. And there's a lot of talk about how they've piled up this huge debt in the healthcare system. Now, if a province, I think it's Nova Scotia, is spending something like 87% of its tax money, into the healthcare system. As a Conservative, what out-of-the-box thinking have you brought in to address this issue of 87% of the budget going towards healthcare?
There's no doubt there's huge pressures on provinces to keep up with whether it's an aging population, or covering new types of, whether it's diseases or covering new medications for healthcare. The pressure on healthcare continues to grow, and we need to work with the provinces to alleviate that pressure. And again, that some of that is healthy living, some of that is actual funding of very specific research projects that we think can help to reduce that. Let's work at reducing cancer, work at reducing some brain diseases and other diseases that really put a lot of pressure on our healthcare system. So I really think it's a matter of working with the provinces and partnering with them. So then the best use of the best use of getting the best bang for their buck is what we need to do.
Yeah, I'm going to read to you extracts of the Fraser Institute report here, which says that average annual rate of 5.7%. This is on healthcare spending. It's grown faster than even GDP, which of course keeps varying. And the IMF has just reduced it to 2.3%, the single biggest downgrade for an individual country. So you have GDP rates of 2.3%. And you have healthcare expenditure growing at an annual rate of 5.7%. How do you think you're going to balance this huge upcoming deficit that's looming in the horizon in terms of policy?
Yeah, in terms of policy, I think one of the most important things is that the federal government continue to support the funding of healthcare. I mean, we respect the province's jurisdictions because each province has an idea on the ground themselves of how they want to administer their healthcare dollars, and we respect that jurisdiction. That's just the way things are set up here in Canada. But further to that, it's very important that we continue to do that. Previous Liberal government, they cut $25 billion out of healthcare when they were balancing their books, and that's part of the reason why we have some of these problems. We've committed that we would continue the 6% increase, and also when we look at it again in the 2014 Health Accord, to continue supporting the provinces so they can meet their healthcare challenges.
Okay, wage increases doled out to federal and provincial public servants have nearly doubled those given to private sector employees in the past decade, according to a new report that calls on governments to take a closer look at efficiency among their ranks of workers. This is what the National Post had to say just a month back. I know the Prime Minister has said that there's been a slash of 14%, I guess it's 14% to ministries, but then doesn't that negate what's, you're increasing wages, you're increasing the number of public servants, and you're decreasing public spending? That just works the reverse of what should be done, You should be increasing funding for ministries, for instance, if it's education, and getting efficiencies in salaries and personnel deployment.
What we've actually done is we've asked every department, the Prime Minister is asking every department to review all of their spending and review their programs. Review the programs of which ones are effective, which aren't, which ones might be redundant as an overlap programs, and cut that back. We call it a strategic review. And through that strategic review, we actually have saved millions of dollars. So they've cut back on a lot of their spending through looking at it and seeing which programs are effective. And if the results aren't there, then maybe we should look at that program and see if we still need that program. We don't want to be funding certain programs just because for the sake that, well, it's been there for 20 years, so let's just keep funding it. Let's look at results. And that alone has saved millions of dollars. So I think it's important to do that review, and we're going to continue to do that as a government.
Okay, Mr. Uppal, you represent a riding which has so much of energy. It's so much of work going on in the energy sector. I want to touch on this issue about how there are people out saying your government does not have a policy direction as far as energy and environment goes. Correct me if we are wrong in asking you this question. What is your thinking there?
Yeah, no, I think that's wrong. We do have the idea is to support the industry in responsible development. And some of that is working with them on regulations and making sure that there's regulations that, yes, protect the environment, but also in an environment where we can get more investment into our industry out here and also help them grow, hire more people. And then when we hire more people, well, we have to make sure that the infrastructure is there for those people as well and support smaller towns like Fort Saskatchewan and Sherwood Park when this influx of people come in. So I think that's one of the most important things that our government is doing, is actually working with the industry and seeing what they need, and also bringing forward and saying, well, yes, that's what you need, but we also want to make sure that the environmental regulations are in place as well, that you do follow. We've made some significant investments in carbon capture and storage and other environmental matters that will help reduce overall emissions.
The 2 points there. One, the fact that I was speaking to people in MIT and they said that this carbon capture storage thing is untested. It's not working out. Anyway, that's not something that I will dispute. Your government is perhaps...
Yeah, we're investing in it, and we're working on as a new technology.
But the second issue is that this correlationship between energy and environment has not been taken up seriously by the government. I was talking to Catherine, I mentioned to you, from Sherwood Park News, and, this is the asthma capital. Your riding is dubbed the asthma capital.
Apparently, I'm not sure if there's been any official studies on this.
Why is the government not taking the health impact of energy development? I mean, no one disputes energy development, the jobs it's creating, especially at a time when recession is on. I'd be a fool to, cry foul that environment should ride over energy. But the point is, why is the government not taking it seriously? There are certain implications to what's happening there, the energy excess in that belt. I mean, nobody's denying that there have to be refineries there. But what are you doing to negate that? First, let's listen to Catherine. Evan, can we have that on, please? Catherine talking about the oil sands and... What are the major issues of concern that have not been addressed so far?
I think communication is a major issue.
She's just talking about, he'll be playing the clip shortly, but what
Tim Uppal has sent out releases from the government that are basically bashing other parties rather than propping up what he's doing in Ottawa, and I've heard that's a major concern. The health effects of the industrial heartland have not been adequately addressed. People say Sherwood Park is the asthma capital of Canada, but there's no real evidence to support that, and I think people have been crying out for studies from Health Canada, and that hasn't been done so far.
So what you're trying to suggest is that even Environment Canada has not done any studies of water and air and like that.
There's air monitoring stations which monitor particulate matter, but there has been no studies specific to the region on health effects such as cancer or asthma in the region.
Is there any sense of what constituents here have, what kind of feeling they have about this intense industrialization, especially the oil industry industrialization, if I may call it so, the black gold belt of Alberta? What is their feeling? What do they feel about being crowded in by this oil industry?
It's very split. On one hand, you have people saying, this is my job, this is my livelihood, this is, that's how we have an average income of $100,000 in this riding. But at the same token, there are people concerned about environmentally sensitive areas such as Elk Island National Park, the Beaver Hills Moraine. They're concerned about the health effects of these upgraders.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to ask Mr. Tim Uppal? Because, as you know, he would be here shortly. And is there any particular question that you would like us to put to him on your behalf? Why he's doing this bashing, for instance? Well, I mean, is it to do with communication, or is it to do with anything that he may not have addressed so far?
Sure. So one big concern is that he has basically acted as a puppet for the Harper government, and he hasn't really represented constituents' views. He's represented what the Harper government has told him to, basically. And so the question I'd pose to him is, as a Conservative MP, how will you represent this riding in Ottawa rather than Ottawa representing us?
Thank you so much, Catherine. Is there any other questions that you have or any other concerns that... So, Mr. Uppal, yes, I pose these two questions to you. Sure. One is that why are you not forcing, I would say, but why aren't you pleading with the government that they should be doing some kind of studies as far as the environmental impact goes? I mean... Why does the government have to be shy? There are environmental impacts. People do understand that. But the point is to address them. What have you done to make the government conscious about the implications to people living there?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, this idea that, we're the asthma capital of Canada or something like that has not really come up before. I don't know if there's been any studies or scientific research to show that, and I would say that that's probably one of the most important things, to make sure that if we are taking any kind of action, that it's based on science and not just the ideas of a few people.
Sorry,
so
I'm going to
think
interrupt you here. But, whenever we have this conversation, there's always this... I've worked with environment. There's always this conflict about methodology. The Harper government says, or the federal government says the methodology is different, and the environment minister of the province says the methodology is different. There's no cohesive movement to address, a cohesive way to look at the impact. So methodology could be anything, but the parameters, the end results have to be tested. So there's this conflict, whenever there's talk. For instance, lately, a scientist, I wouldn't name him, but he talked about how there were certain issues with water cropping up. And then there was this whole debate that the methodology that he used it's
important
different.
to make sure that the methodology is scientifically sound. There's no doubt about it. If you're going to make scientific, remarks about something, have scientific conclusions, then you have to make sure that the methodology and the science behind it is solid. If there's, in areas of industry, when there are concerns, Industry Canada, if presented that there's some serious issues here, they will look into it. The industry out here there are regulations on them of the types of emissions that can come out. There are air quality testing that happens.
It's old hat.
It's
old hat.
And they need to follow that.
I worked there. I've been there. They don't even consider. Look, let's face it. There are certain chemicals that are new to our environment because of the industrial. The industrialization has changed. I mean, it's not the conventional industry. It's new industry. Sorry, I don't think the Department of Environment, whether it's in the province or at the federal level, they're even taking into account those chemicals that are now pouring into our soil, our water. And they're taking the old conventional view that, sorry for interrupting you, but I feel passionately about this. They're taking the old conventional yardsticks. So obviously, if you're not testing, for instance, for us, arsenic or mercury, you won't get it. So you'll say to the people, there's no mercury in the water. But the point is, is it even being included in the studies?
I believe that whether it's Health Canada or at the federal level or the provincial level, they are making sure that Canadians are kept safe, and they're going through the tests that they need to do, tests that they've done before, and tests that they will continue to do. Now, if there's allegations that they're specifically leaving certain chemicals out, that has not been presented to me at all. So that's maybe something that can be looked into. Again, they're allegations, but otherwise, Health Canada and Industry Canada, along with the provinces, have a responsibility to make sure Canadians are safe. And as far as that I've heard or has been presented to me, that is happening. Industry itself out here has been very responsible. I meet with various industry representatives. They go over their safety plans and their plan for this area to make sure that the residents are safe, the residents continue in good health. And I have a great deal of confidence in the fact that they are also partners in this, along with government and the industry itself.
I know this is a bit of a provincial level
it is. Some of the, yes, absolutely.
But, I was talking to the Chamber of Commerce, I think, just a few days back, and they said that the legislation, they're facing a problem. The federal legislation is something, and the provincial legislation is something. For instance, even in water. And they said this is proving to be a real bottleneck.
And some of that actually, as a federal government in the last year or so, we've actually worked with the province and the industry to resolve that. There have been some environmental regulations that we've looked at and said, okay, well, you're just double, this is just overlap. So if you have to go through the testing once, well, we could just look at that testing and say, okay, that's been accomplished either through the provincial level or the federal level. So it's important to work with the industry. It's important to work with the province and to resolve these issues.
Do we have your assurance that if you win the next time over, and we hope that you do, that you are going to take up seriously these issues with the Harper
Absolutely.
government?
If they're presented to me that this is an issue that was brought forward, I was brought forward with the power lines issue. It's a provincial issue, and the federal government really doesn't have any say in where they go. But still, when that was brought to me by the RICA people, I took that back to the Health Committee and I asked Health Canada, have you looked into these power lines? What's safe to our residents? And they did look into it, and they said that the emissions are at this level and they're safe. But that's my job, is to make sure that the questions are asked of the government.
Because I was, as I said, I was talking to somebody in the industry, and they said that this water issue is turning out to be a bit of a, a bottleneck. The Athabasca River, and in fact, it's in your writing. Some bridge has been stopped. Federal government could, they've done, they've passed it. And
there's some permit issue there, there's some permit complications there.
It's to do with water testing.
I've actually had brought that up with the environment minister in the past, and they were going to look at it. Again, it's one of those things where there's some provincial jurisdiction, a little bit of federal, and also working with the industry. So it's one of those things that we just have to work through.
Okay, going back to Catherine's question about your being a puppet with of the Harper government and raising issues that they want you to.
Yeah. No, I disagree altogether. I mean, I am a very strong supporter of Prime Minister Harper and a very proud member of his team. But, with the responsibilities that the Prime Minister has given me to be on the Health Committee, the Immigration Committee, to be appointed to 2 ministerial advisory councils, these are all ways for me to give my input into legislation and the way government is, the direction of the government. So I've been a very strong voice for this riding. When it came down to the millions of dollars that was being spent on investment across the country for infrastructure and recreational programming and cultural spaces, we made sure that in this riding in Sherwood Park and Fort Saskatchewan and Northeast Edmonton, we got our fair share. And
yes, I must admit that. I mean, to be honest, to
and
the
that's
people
my
I've
job,
been interviewing,
to deliver.
you have gotten a lot of money
We've
your
delivered
riding.
into this riding, absolutely.
There's no doubt about
we
it.
made sure that we're at the table with the finance minister and other people involved to make sure that these are the needs of my riding. And the way I find out about the needs of my riding, I sit down with the mayors, I've sat down with the councillors, sat down with residences. There was a group of parents that came to my office and said, we just don't have enough ice hockey space. We don't have enough rink space. So what we do, we went, we talked, and we got $1 million for Millennium Place. This is representing the riding, making sure, but that you can only do that if you're
what about the fact that you're representing a chunk of the industry, also Alberta's industrial heartland?
Sure, yeah.
It's going to be a huge issue, not just in terms of investment, but in terms of the number of upgraders that are going. This whole Alberta heartland thing, where so many municipalities are conglomerating together, and you'll have to do a lot of logistical work and a lot of.
Absolutely, and it's a very exciting time for our region out here.
So, do you have any thoughts there? Are you for slowing down the process?
No, I don't think we should go in and cap anything. I think we need to work with the industry, make sure that there's responsible development, and it's pretty exciting that we're getting some new announcements of upgraders coming in. We're going to have an influx of people working here. We're going to have, they're already talking about a possible labor shortage. We need to work with the industry to make sure that we have labor that's available to Alberta to make sure that we can do the work that needs to get done. So these are all things that at the federal level that I will play my part to make sure that our voice is heard in a Harper cabinet.
Another thing that a lot of Albertans, including me, are passionate about is this whole controversy over foreign temporary workers. Now, the oil patch, they always keep asking about foreign temporary workers. And there's an unemployment ratio of 7.8%. I can't just imagine that you have an unemployment rate of 7.8% and you still are asking for foreign temporary workers. Where's the government?
And you know what, it's not just that. The government is there to provide the workers, to help industry get the workers. Industry first has to prove that no Canadian is willing to work or is available to work or has the skills to work at that job, whether it's a hotel who's looking for people to make the beds, a Tim Hortons to pour the coffee and make the donuts, or somebody in the oil patch to do the welding and that kind of thing. So those industries, those employers need to make sure, first, that yes, we've looked for Canadians, we've looked for this long, here's the proof that we've looked. Unfortunately, we can't find anybody to fill those jobs. So can we apply for a temporary foreign worker?
That's where I think the HRD ministry at the federal level has to work harder. You have to have compatibility of immigrants coming into this country, compatibility with what the industry goes. It seems to us that the industry is going one direction. They want this kind of personnel. This is the profile of the personnel that they want. And the government is bringing in a different kind of personnel.
Absolutely not. We don't choose a person. We don't choose a person.
I know.
Industry picks who they want, right?
Yes.
Industry decides, I want, John Smith sitting in, whether it's the Philippines, that I want them to hire them. So that person actually applies as a member with an application to a certain company, whether it's Tim Hortons or somewhere in the oil patch. So it's actually the industry themselves are picking these temporary foreign workers. We're not bringing them in and then finding jobs. They're landing with a job.
But Mr. Uppal, some would argue that the industries hijack the government's agenda. It's the government that decides, that gives a direction to where the economy is going. You know, it's the government that has to say to the industry, okay, let's work together and let's say this is the number of welders you want, this is what you want. Let's train these people. There are people who are unemployed who are 20, 25, and even up to 50, 55, 60, and they're going through hardship, you know.
But we have actually, we have invested millions into training through the EI program and training local people here to upgrade their skills. We've invested in the trades so people can, $2,000 grant for apprenticeships. These are things that we've worked with the industry and said, what do you need? And if you see right now, Dow Chemical has a great partnership with NATE. You know, these are things that we're working with industry on, but industry is also taking the lead on some of these issues.
Yes, but the
to making sure that they have the right people coming in, that they have the right people coming through the education stream that can work there. Temporary foreign workers, when a Canadian's not available, then we bring in somebody from outside to work temporarily.
There's a report, which I haven't got. Unfortunately, my computer is not working. So there's a report which says that the major concern of the industry is cost cutting, and labor is a major concern. There are allegations, and I'm going to pay Catherine to just substantiate what I'm saying,
sure,
so you know that there are two people and not just one journalist who's raised this issue. They're saying that, yes, it's because these are cheaper labor, and the categorization of temporary foreign workers, that's a big issue. Your government perhaps needs to look into this. I don't know. I mean, the way that they're categorized, they have to pay lesser in terms of housing, in terms of recognition of what their status is. So professional workers, and, they fall into one category, but the foreign temporary workers who are coming in never make it to that category. So, there's this whole issue of, if you go deeper and read what the policy issues are, it's heartbreaking.
Well, you mentioned wages. If you're going to hire a temporary foreign worker, you are regulated to pay a certain wage, a wage that is competitive here in Canada. So you cannot, if you have to pay somebody here $15 an hour, you can't hire someone at $9 an hour and expect the temporary foreign worker to work at $9. You have to pay them the $15. This is all regulated through Human Resources Canada.
Let's look at what Catherine has to say on this issue. She's worked with, she's done a story on it too.
People are still very upset about that, and
so, but that's an issue with the party as well, because apparently he's been backed by the party, and he still won. So one doesn't know how exactly to look at this. Would you like to throw more light upon this? Of course, Mr. Ford, I've been speaking with him, and he has the same grudge that it's the last-minute nomination. Does that reflect on the party somehow, on the Conservatives?
Yeah, it's absolutely a top-down sort of politics. Rather than having a person who represents this area, it's someone who the party handpicked, someone who has not lived in Sherwood Park all their life. That's one of the criticisms. Rather than someone who's involved in the community and who the community chose.
Catherine, we also were talking about the Israeli apartheid motion and how Mr. Uppal is very involved with it. Was there a particular need or a necessity as far as this constituency goes? Do you feel the undertones of any racial undertones within the constituency, or is it something else?
I didn't actually hear an outcry saying that Israeli Apartheid Week was a big deal, but I did hear backlash from his motion saying that they should consider Israeli Apartheid Week racist, or that criticism of the state of Israel is a problem. I have heard that, for example, since September 2000, about 1,600 Israelis have been killed, and it's 6 times that amount for Palestine. So I think there is room for legitimate criticism of the state of Israel, and it's a freedom of speech issue.
There have been certain negative, not insinuation. There are documents saying that there have been certain, how do I put it, not so good dealings as far as Mr. Uppal's personal property business goes. correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that's sorted out now, or what is the issue there?
I think a lot of people find it an issue with his character. He's been sued multiple times. He's defaulted on 2 mortgages. Some would say that as a property manager, that's an inevitability, but some people do still think it speaks to his character.
Does it still hang out there within Sherwood Park, within people's minds, and do you think that may impact still, or you think that's not a consideration?
I think that's still an issue, and the nomination is still an issue, though perhaps to a lesser extent than it was. He's had 3 years to prove himself.
And how do you see this riding in terms of other political candidates? Do you think, because last time the Conservative votes were split between Mr. Uppal and Mr. Ford, how do you see it playing out this time? Is there any other candidate from any other party who has a better chance of splitting the vote further?
Well, there is the Liberal candidate, there's the NDP candidate, there's also a Western Bloc candidate,
right.
But I think it will be a very 2-horse race between Mr. Ford and Mr. Uppal.
Okay, Catherine, there's a lot of concern a lot of people would have about temporary foreign workers, especially when the downturn in the economy happened. They were not in a very good position. I did a report on that. And that is of major concern to this riding because you have all the upgraders and you have the oil belt here. Do you have any feedback on this issue?
Absolutely. So with a lot of the people who live here wanting to go to the oil patch, it's big money. A lot of businesses have hired temporary foreign workers, and I've worked with some who've said there have been abuses, that their contracts were violated, that one woman told them they couldn't bring family members over, and just lying to them and abusing them.
But I guess the temporary foreign workers would not be allowed to get in family, would they? I don't think that would be, but yes, abuse they would be, because there's a lot of discrepancy between what constitutes temporary, the contracts of temporary foreign workers, and it's on the whim and fancy of the companies that hire them. And what about law and order? This is supposed to be a calmer, kind of a more, not so... Okay, Mr. Uppal, I do apologize. We did play it from the beginning,
Sure.
But I'll come to the personal issues. We would like you to talk about it, but
Sure.
temporary foreign workers was the issue there, and you heard Catherine there. And now I'd like Evan to play that tape where you, in the House of Commons, you are talking about how the Minister of Immigration, Mr. Kenny, during his tenure, so much of increase in the number of immigrants to the country has taken place.
Increased economic immigration to historic highs. In 2011, we will help up to 65,000 mums, dads, husbands, wives, and children immigrate here under the FC1 and FC4 family class programs. The Liberals, meanwhile, let backlogs expand and processing times explode. Our Conservative government will continue to support immigration, including supporting cricket players in Canada, such as Rizwan Chima and Tyson Gordon, while pursuing immigration policies that will attract the Canadian Sachin Tendulkar. Thank you.
Interesting stuff there. The point is that so many newcomers do come with so many dreams and hopes and aspirations, and we let them wilt away under some pretext or the other, whether it's preconceived notions about immigrants. The point is not that your government has gotten more number of immigrants. The point is that even the United Nations report says that in 2006, the unemployment rate of newcomers was 11.5%, much above the Canadian average of 4.9%. You represent a minority community. People expect and look up to you to resolve these issues. You're the blue-eyed boy.
Well, I'm on the immigration committee, so that's part of it, sure.
So what have you done? What have you done to get this?
First of all, Canada has a responsibility to look at within our country and say, okay, what kind of immigration do we need? What are our priorities? And one of those priorities is economic immigration. We want immigrants to come here that will help support our economy. Our economy is going in the right direction, but we do need support. We have a lot of Canadians here who can work, but there's still gaps within employment. So if we're going to bring immigrants over, we want those that will be contributing to the Canadian economy and those that can come here and get a job right away. That's kind of our priority. There are refugees that we have a responsibility to bring in, and we would prefer that these are recognized, known refugees, people that we know what their background is, and preferably straight out of a third country that, the other country where we know that they're maybe in a refugee camp or something. And then we also
traveled to Pakistan. You've not been able to do that. You remember your trip? I think it was when
in 2009.
The Swat Valley.
Yeah, during the Swat Valley
well, how
time.
much could you help? I mean, we have. This is the whole issue that you've brought to the forefront. The refugee issue. People are disappointed with your government on this issue because the genuine refugees are not making it to the shores of this country.
Well, and that's also
what some people say.
In a minority parliament, absolutely, and that's where the opposition has opposed our laws in stopping that human trafficking. We're trying to reduce the illegal immigration and bring in genuine refugees. But in order to bring in the genuine refugees, we need to stop the other immigration that is the queue jumpers and those that are just paying to get here. So that's part of the problem.
But you don't have the political will to take on. These are strong issues that the country has to deal with.
We brought legislation forward to do that. We were the only party that did that, to stop human smuggling, and the opposition stopped it. This is something that the Liberals, the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP got together and stopped our human smuggling legislation. They didn't even let it get to a proper vote and have a debate in the House of Commons. So what we need to do is have a stronger mandate to be able to bring in legislation such as this to stop human smuggling, stop human trafficking, and bringing genuine refugees. Our third priority is family reunification. If there's young people here and they get married overseas, then their spouses should be allowed to come, or some dependent children.
So the government says that they put some restrictions on family reunion.
There's always a number of immigration that we think is acceptable to Canada. I mean, we want to make sure that if there's immigrants are coming here, that's not just a wide door open. We need to be careful because there's obviously pressures on our healthcare system and pressures on everything when we bring immigrants over. So there are some numbers and restrictions on all categories, including economic and refugee and family class. But we have really supported the family class to the point where spouses and dependent children are coming to support the workers that we already have here, or immigrants. As for what you're saying about newcomers and their ability to find jobs, we've actually increased funding to what we call settlement funding to help them integrate better into Canadian society. We are the only first government to come in and say, no, we think that they should know one of the two languages, whether it's French or English. We're saying that they should be encouraged to integrate.
The problem I have there is in the fact that your government has not understood the fact that the profile of the modern immigrant is not the same. 50 years back when an immigrant came, today you're getting the best of professionals, the Sachin Tendulkars.
Yeah.
You're making them wilt away. It's not the funds that you put in, it's how you're working with your companies. For instance, some of the banks have done a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
Like TD, and they've done a fantastic job of absorbing, they've created a culture. But there are certain organizations who are not, I'm sorry to say that, this is my personal experience and I may be wrong, but they're not creating that, or the culture of newcomer tolerance is not there. And some of them are far more experienced. And your own statistics says this. Statistics Canada says. Most of them have a brilliant people.
They do. And there are challenges in getting them recognized here in Canada. We've supported that. We've actually offering bridge loans so they can upgrade if they need to and get their credentials recognized. We've worked with different organizations. We can't just look at someone's medical degree and say, well, yes, that's accepted. We have to go through the different medical associations or the engineering associations. So we have to work with them to make sure that these people get accredited. Because there's two things here. One, we want to make sure that they get accredited and get into a job that we want them to work in. The other thing is we also want to make sure that they're up to par. These foreign schools, we may not know much about them, so we want to be able to make sure that they are vetted and make sure that if there's an engineer working on a bridge, that he actually knows what he's doing in a Canadian context. So there is this balance that we need to play, and more and more immigrants that are coming over, they have the skills and are actually contributing to Canadian society.
But it's now getting more tough for them to, it takes them 10 years to reach the same level. That's what is...
It may for some people, but the support is there. And also, we've increased the funding for them to be able to integrate. This is an important part of what our multiculturalism system is, integration into Canadian society. And that, I think, is going to go a long way in saying that, listen, let's get to know your neighbors, be able to talk to your neighbors, and have a society where we can actually communicate and work together rather than celebrate your own individual cultures and stay in your own little silos.
Mr. Uppal, you've raised a very valid point here about multiculturalism. There's this whole issue about developed countries like France talking about the fact that it's not worked for them. And there's this whole issue even in Quebec, for instance, about minority dressing up, the way that minorities dress up, the hijab or issues like that. What are your personal views and, what are you doing to bridge the gap?
I think it's important that if there are certain regulations with government, I mean, if there's a safety regulation, a sincere safety regulation, then that should be followed by any customs or of anybody with whether it's their faith or their cultural customs. If there's something about identity, I mean, this issue came up about the veiled voting or veiled if somebody was to wear a niqab and getting government services. Well, in many government services, it's important for us to be able to identify who that person is if you're signing documents or doing something like that. So in that case, I think we can. There's got to be some mutual understanding that identity has to be proven. So voting and signing documents. So I think it's a matter of reasonable accommodation and both sides working together and kind of talking it out. In the sense that if there's a safety concern, sure, here let's work together and deal with that. Or if there's an actual legal concern, let's deal with it.
Okay, now let's go to the personal questions.
Sure.
Catherine did mention about this whole issue of your being a last-minute candidate for this riding. Mm-hmm. What do you say to this?
Yeah, first of all, that happened about 5 years ago. I've been involved with the Conservative Party for a long time, back to the Reform Alliance days. When there was an opportunity to run here after Ken Epp retired, I did. Last minute is somebody's assessment of it. Frankly, it was the same rules and deadlines that were placed across the whole country, so everybody had the same deadlines to deal with. I worked hard, got in my memberships, campaigned hard, and won the nomination. At the federal level in the Conservative Party, there's actually, I think it's either a 2 or 3 week deadline. So whoever I was running against or anybody else interested, it was actually a 2 or 3 week lead time into the fact that I was running. So it wasn't like I showed up that day with a bunch of people. There's also, I think, a 21-day cutoff time that you have to be a member for at least 21 days or 30 days to even vote in a nomination. So anybody would have known who was actually already a member 21 days prior to the nomination itself. But frankly, it's really not an issue anymore. We talked about it back then. Again, this was something that happened 5 years ago. People in this riding are really concerned about, well, what's happening, with the economy, what's happening with the justice system, how are you supporting families? That's more important to them than kind of like a political process that happened 5 years ago.
But he's still standing. Mr. Ford is still standing from the riding. Mm-hmm. And basically what you're doing is you're splitting the vote because Mr. Epp was before, and he got 63%, and now basically that 63 or 64% is being split between you
absolutely.
And Mr. Ford. So this may well be suiting the two of you, but that's another issue. But talking about your other allegations mm-hmm. against you, and they're not allegations, there are certain newspapers that have spoken about this whole thing about your defaults on mortgages and how would you...
Well, it wasn't actually a default on a mortgage. But anyways, I was, about 10, 11 years ago, I was involved in a business. And unfortunately, sometimes businesses don't always go the way you want to. And you have to deal with these through a court system. And we did. And that was settled. There was other people involved. And, we got settled and we resolved that. This was well before I became a member of Parliament.
There's one concern that, not a concern, but there's one request that one of the industry chambers of commerce, they said that I should be speaking with you. I will not name the chamber, but they said that if we could have some kind of a deferred tax payment on huge investments, mm-hmm. that would be a great...
Yeah, there basically would be an accelerated capital cost allowance for upgraders. And I have advocated for this. I've met with, I believe it's probably the Sherwood Park Chamber of Commerce, because I've met with them. This is something that I do regularly, is meet with my constituents and meet with the chambers and meet with business leaders and small businesses to discuss what's important to them. And when the Sherwood Park Chamber, their executive was in Ottawa, I arranged a meeting between our Sherwood Park Chamber and the Prime Minister to discuss this very issue, that this would be very important to the industry. And this is something that I have spoken to the Finance Minister about as well, and we're hoping that at some point we'll be able to phase this in. We are in a deficit situation. We're in a minority government situation, so not everything can be brought in, but I think it's important that our idea from the Sherwood Park Chamber actually made it straight to the Prime Minister through a meeting that I arranged, and also I've spoken to the Finance Minister about it as well. I've spoken to the Industry Minister about it as well.
So one can say that there is some kind of thinking going on about
Absolutely, there's thinking going on. There's many people who think that this is a great idea, that we feel that this is something that would probably encourage more investment into this industry. But again, there's so many factors right now, and our focus right now is to pay down the deficit. So any major expenditures would actually have to come in after we pay down the deficit and balance the books.
But is there any, do you find that investment is difficult to come by, especially with so much of competition from nearby provinces now? In the oil?
I think there's, as long as there's an environment where investment is encouraged. We have one of the lowest tax regimes, in most of the developed world. We are already committing to lowering that even more. We are committing to work with industry to make sure that regulations that they have to follow, that there's not too much red tape, and that encourage their growth. And I think that is making Canada a very friendly place to invest. And we are seeing some of that benefit right here in this riding.
Thank you so much, Mr. Uppal. I guess we've exhausted our questions with you.
I enjoyed it.
I'm sure there are many more which I may not have spoken.
problem.
I may not have raised those issues, but thank you so much.